It's great to be joined today by John Kindervag, who joined Palo Alto Networks as field CTO after 8.5 years at Forrester Research, where he was a vice president and principal analyst on the security and risk team, considered one of the foremost cybersecurity experts in the world, very well known for creating the zero trust model of cybersecurity, which we'll talk about. So, John, we recently spoke to Molly McHugh about information warfare and sort of some ancillary or tangential issues that are related to cybersecurity in many ways. Let's start maybe more broadly with, when we talk about cybersecurity, what are we talking about and what are the sort of recent concerns in the field?
Well, cybersecurity has become an all-encompassing term for bad things that happen on networks, whether they're public networks or private networks, and how do you secure the systems and the data, the devices, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very broad term that it could include things like cyber warfare, all types of hacking, data breaches. So it's not very specific, but it does seem to resonate with people, so they understand that the term is about the cybers, right? We're not trying to protect the cybers, we're trying to protect data, we're trying to protect assets, though.
What are the sort of day-to-day ways in which the average user of technology, you have a smartphone, you probably have it connected to both social networks and your email, you're regularly browsing websites on it, you have some, regular computer use as part of your job as well as personally. What are the biggest cybersecurity sort of concerns that would impact the average person in that way?
Here's the deal, David. I don't think that the average person can really be concerned about cybersecurity and live their life. I think that we spend too much time blaming the victims of cybersecurity instead of trying to fix the fundamental problems in the systems that allow these kinds of negative consequences of using technology to happen. So I'm not a person who's going to give people a lot of advice on their home usage. I mean, there's a few things that are pretty simple. Don't use an unlocked cell phone, for example. Get your applications from the store of the phone manufacturer, because at least they've done some vetting of the technology, and every once in a while something will slip by. But think of the store as a whitelist for the applications you should use. Those are some of the simple things, but the rest of it is way too complicated, even for the top people to always protect themselves, let alone the average user who just wants to get their day-to-day job done.
So is cybersecurity really more of an institutional issue when we're talking about governments and corporations that are providers of either hardware or software or connectivity? Is that really where the crux of the issue is?
Absolutely. Those are the people who are going to have to do it, right? It's too complex for us to push it all the way to the edges of the user. So I liken it to trying to decide whether or not to go into a building if it's safe or not. Do you look and try to figure out, well, should I go into this restaurant? Will the building fall down while I'm eating lunch? No, that's the job of some other profession, in that case, civil engineering and code enforcement and all that kind of thing. And so that's what eventually cybersecurity is going to have to be. It's going to have to be the civil engineering and the code enforcement of the internet, of connectivity, to make sure that people can use this technology in a safe and secure fashion.
Before we move into talking about zero trust, based on your observation of the way in which technology is developing, what's on the horizon in terms of the types of cybersecurity concerns that may surface, which we're not even necessarily dealing with right now? Is there anything you can sort of paint a picture for us regarding in terms of on the horizon?
Well, the horizon is limitless from the bad guys and girls perspective. I mean, where we're going to see it, a lot of it is in the so-called Internet of Things, your smart thermostat, We've seen it with the IP cameras that have been used in the Mirai botnet. Anything that exists technologically, people with malicious intentions are going to try to abuse that technology for their own purposes. And we should never underestimate the threats. Just because a threat doesn't exist today doesn't mean that it can't exist tomorrow. And it's limited by the by the imagination of the adversary. This is an adversarial business. And so we're always a little bit behind if you're on the good guy, the good girl side.
Are there any institutions or organizations that really seem to be sort of proactively at the maximum point they could be? And I guess to sort of contextualize that, we saw so many cybersecurity breaches during 2016. Everything from the Justice Department and the IRS, Snapchat, Yahoo, and 500 million accounts or something like that. I mean, is there a type of institution that seems to be better protected?
I don't know if there's a type. It's an attitude, and it's an enlightenment. At Yahoo, they used to call the security people the paranoids. Oh, you're paranoid. You're just, that will never happen to us. Only because we couldn't imagine it happening to us. But it did happen to them, and it cost Yahoo almost the entire value of its company. So you just have to realize that this is a different landscape, a different world. The digital world isn't at all like the analog world, and all of the analogies that we try to do to make it understandable to us just don't work. You're living in the same bad neighborhood as every single attacker on the world. There's no suburbs on the internet. You can't hide, and so you're going to have to protect yourself.
Let's talk a little bit about the zero trust model that you developed. What is that for people who aren't familiar with it? Let's start there.
The zero trust model is a new model of cybersecurity that says that the old model, where users and networks and devices inside of a perimeter, inside of a company or an organization, are trusted, and everything outside of that organization is untrusted, and therefore we only have to protect from attacks coming from the outside. And the mantra was originally trust but verify, which everybody says, well, Ronald Reagan said that, and he actually didn't. He was making a joke where he uses a Russian proverb, speaking in Russian, and says, oh, that of course is translated as trust but verify, and everybody laughs when he gives this speech because they know the essence of the Russian proverb is not trust but verify, but never trust at all. And so when I started looking at what was the fundamental problem is that we embedded trust into a system that not only doesn't need trust to function, but functions poorly because we add trust to it.
Interesting. And from a practical perspective, what are some of the sort of bullet points of how this functions?
Well, the first thing is we need to understand that no people are ever on networks. So people say, you're saying that people aren't trustworthy. And I'm not saying that. That's a discussion that you should go back and have with Julius Caesar. I'm saying that people aren't packets. No person has ever been on a network. You and I, David, we're not on the network right now. There are packets traversing networks that are asserted to come from identities that may or may not belong to us, but we're not on the network. So we're not doing anything to impugn people's trustworthiness. We're just saying we're going to treat each and every packet exactly the same. And when we do that, that just opens up a lot of doors and a lot of revelations. And so we can inspect all the traffic, we can log all the traffic, we can put much more granular controls on it. And most importantly, we start at the thing we're trying to protect. I use the analogy of the U.S. Secret Service. The Secret Service knows three things that we don't know in cybersecurity. They know who the president is, they know where the president is, and they know who's supposed to have access to the president. If I asked almost any corporation about the data or assets that they need to protect, they can't tell me those three things. They don't know what to protect, they don't know where the things that they're supposed to protect are, and they don't know who's supposed to have access to the things that they're supposed to protect. Therefore, they just push all the controls to some edge and hope that maybe they catch something bad happening before it's too late.
Last thing I want to touch on, there are some who say that businesses sort of have a free market natural incentive to regulate themselves in a way that will make them not problematic or dangerous to employees, customers, the environment, et cetera. And in my view is that that's been pretty widely debunked. When it comes to corporations and cybersecurity, does such a natural interest exist to protect all data, customers, employees, et cetera? Or does that not exist and it would need to sort of be mandated by some kind of regulatory apparatus?
It should exist because all regulations and compliance, in my view, is a failure of corporate governance. We didn't get ahead of the problem. And so there will always be more and more governance added to it until people realize that security, cybersecurity is a pay me now or pay me a lot more later kind of business. And if you understand that, then maybe those incentives can be in place. Secondly, though, and I think the big thing that's changing is that CEOs and leaders of organizations are getting fired because of data breaches. We saw that with Target. That was the first one that really put a shockwave through the entire industry because suddenly it wasn't just, oh, I'm going to fire the security guy who didn't do a good job, even though I didn't give him a budget to do a good job. It was, oh, the board has to protect themselves, so they're going to get rid of the leader. And whether that's the CEO of Target or whether that's Catherine Archuleta of the OPM, Office of Personnel Management, or the head of Sony. I mean, there's just so many times that people have gotten fired. The leaders of companies or organizations have gotten fired, and so that does change the incentive structure pretty strongly. But there still will always be regulations because we're always going to be cheap. That's just human nature.
Indeed it is. We've been speaking with John Kindervag, Palo Alto Networks Field CTO. Thanks so much for talking to us about this.
Thank you very much, David.